Hi, I'm Rosie Stevens and I'm the director of Mployable. We specialise in careers coaching, professional CV writing and recruitment. And today I'd really like to talk to you about how to create the perfect CV. We're going to cover a couple of things today. First of all, we're going to have a look at the structure. So how that CV looks, how long it's going to be, how you kind of put it together. Then we're going to have a look at the content. So the kind of things that are going to make that CV stand out, what's going to make you different, how you're really going to catch the recruiter's attention. Then finally, I'm going to round it off with my top tips for success. So hopefully you might find a few things in there that'll help you on your way. So first things first, I think there's quite a lot of sort of concern around writing a CV. There's a lot of talk about, how do I catch the recruiter's eye, or how do I get past the software and all that kind of stuff. And I think that just sort of lumps pressure on what is already quite a difficult situation, because it's a really un-British thing to want to kind of blow our own trumpet. But essentially that's what a CV is. There's a way of doing it, don't get me wrong. We don't want a CV full of complete brags about how incredible you are and all that sort of stuff. But we do want to know about what makes you great. We do want to know why you're perfect for this job. But there's a really clever way of doing it. So first and foremost, I would say your CV needs to be ideally around about the 2-page mark. Much longer than that, and I'm starting to wonder what it is that you're trying to tell me. I've seen CVs that are up to sort of 10 pages, and when I have hundreds of CVs to look through, I do not have time as a recruiter, and I'm sure many of my other fellow recruiters do not have time to look through 10 pages of stuff about you. If you're getting to that kind of level, you're probably looking at repeating yourself, unnecessary information, waffle, big no-no in a CV. Qualifications that maybe don't need to be there, are not relevant for this position, jobs that maybe are a very long time ago and are possibly not relevant for this position, that kind of thing. So to condense it down to 2 pages, there's a couple of things that I think you should really look at. So first and foremost is whether or not you're repeating yourself. So really look through your CV, be really brutal with yourself and say, am I saying the same thing in lots of different ways, in lots of different places? Once you've done that, really skim through, make sure that you're cutting down to the real core of what is important. Second thing, if you did qualifications a number of years ago, or you've changed industries, maybe you're listing qualifications that aren't relevant to what you're looking for, or maybe will not get you this job. That's something, we'll come onto this a little bit later when we look at the content side of things, but that's something that, I'm really keen to drill into this is keep asking yourself, is this relevant? Does the employer need to know this in order to decide whether or not I'm a good fit for this job? If the answer to that question is no, take it out, or skim it, or overview it, or replace it with further information can be given upon request, something along those kind of lines. Third thing we can look at is work history. If you've been in employment a number of years, what you can do is have a look through and have a look back at some of your earlier jobs. You may have had jobs while you were in school, in college, that sort of side of things that maybe aren't really relevant to what you're looking at today. So you can always put up to a certain date, sort of further information can be available upon request, sort of further work history, that sort of thing. And if the recruiter is interested, then believe me, they will ask. So we've got our 2 pages. I would recommend starting with the obvious, so put your name on it. And my personal tip is to put the name that you like to be called. There is a slight caveat with this. Obviously, there are some industries where you will need a certain sort of certification, qualification, degree, masters, and you may well have your birth name upon that qualification. If you think that your CV is going to need to match up to that, then make sure your name is consistent across everything. However, if you aren't in that position, then I would recommend just putting the name that you like to be called. So if your name is Thomas and you like to be called Tom and you have no reason, i.e. certification, degree certificate, etc., to be Thomas on your CV, be Tom. Because all that's going to happen is if you're Thomas, the recruiter's going to call and say, hi, can I speak to Thomas? And you're going to say, oh yeah, that's me, it's Tom. So just put Tom in the first place. Or unless, like I did once, you're too scared to tell them that your actual name is a shortened version of your name and you end up spending the next 6 months being called your birth name, hating it every time they call you it, just because then time goes on and it gets too awkward to tell them. So don't make that mistake. Just put the name that you like to be called on your CV from the get-go. Everybody's happy, no awkward conversations. Secondly, contact details. So mobile phone number, landline, any other contact number that you are happy to be called on. Don't put a current office number unless you are happy for a recruiter to call you on that office number. Make sure your mobile number is up to date, the digits are correct, no typos or anything in the contact details, because if a recruiter can't call you, you ain't going to get an interview. Simple as. If they can't contact you, end of the game, basically. Secondly, you need to look at your email address. Obviously, make sure it's correct. No typos again. But make sure it's appropriate. I mean, sexylady66@hotmail.com is not going to get you an interview. I mean, who wants to employ sexylady66? Nobody. So make sure, even if you have to create a new email account, it's super easy to do via Hotmail, Gmail, Yahoo. All of those email service providers will allow you to create a free email address really quickly and really simply. So if you need to make a new one, make a new one. So we've got our name, we've got our contact details. Next, I would always recommend adding a personal profile. Now we're going to go into this again in sort of the content section, but I would just make something that sounds like you. Make it sound professional. I tend to also recommend leaving out the I and your name. Never use the third person. It's creepy. I hate it. You might think it makes you sound cool. It doesn't. So I would tend to go along the lines of something like a professional, so-and-so and so-and-so, not I am a professional. I just think it sounds more professional, leaving out the sort of the personalisms within that initial sort of paragraph. Like I say, we'll go into a little bit more of content shortly. Next, I think it completely depends on where you're at in your career and the type of job you're going for, but you can either put education or you can put experience. I think they're interchangeable. If you're a graduate or you've recently qualified in something that's relevant, or you're a career changer and you've done some qualifications to help you move into that career, I would put your education first, because that's your most relevant piece of information. If you're a recent graduate looking to go into engineering and you've got a degree in engineering, but your only working experience is working in a cafe, it's so much more relevant for the recruiter to be, or the hiring manager to see your engineering experience than it is for them to see your work experience in a cafe. Equally, if your education doesn't really mean that much, or it's not hugely relevant to the area that you're trying to go into, but you've been working in that area, go for the experience first, qualifications second. Once you're into your qualifications, so we'll start with that first, you're going to go chronologically. So first, sort of nearest date first, if you like. So we're in 2018. So you would go kind of 2018, 17, 16, so on and so forth, all the way to the bottom of your career. So sort of, I would recommend starting at secondary school. Nobody really wants to know what you got in your year 9 SATs. That's not really going to be relevant to most jobs today. And also, I would say with your secondary school education, especially as you get further on in your career, obviously each kind of qualification supersedes the other. So unless you really want to, I wouldn't bother going into kind of chapter and verse on exactly what you got for each qualification, unless it's necessary for the job that you're applying for. So you need a certain GCSE or equivalent qualification. You need to detail what grade it was that you got there. Don't worry. I would just say you got 11 GCSEs at grades A star to C. I would put 11 GCSEs at grades A star to C. Once you start breaking down, if you use a line for each one of those GCSE qualifications, you're using up really valuable space on your CV, and thinking about trying to keep it under that 2 pages. It's just not going to happen if you're kind of detailing chapter and verse every single GCSE grade that you got. So you've got that sort of going backwards in kind of chronological order. So most recent first, going down through all your qualifications. As I say, if you've got lots and lots of qualifications, so say you've worked in the care sector or the social sector, I know there's a lot of training, certifications, qualifications that come with that. If you're not looking to stay in that industry, if you're looking to change, or some of your qualifications just aren't quite relevant for what you're looking for, don't put them in. You don't need to. Just say a full training record can be available upon request, something along those sort of lines. However, if you are sort of applying for jobs and you do have some synergy between the qualifications that you've got, make sure it's in there. But like I say, keep asking yourself that question. Every time you put something into your CV, say to yourself, is this relevant for the job that I'm applying for? If the answer is no, don't put it in. That's just the golden rule. If you ask yourself that every time, you'll be fine. You'll keep within that 2-page limit. So that's education. If you're doing your work experience next, as I say, I do think they're interchangeable dependent on you and what you're going for, what you're looking for, your background, your history. Work experience is very much the same sort of thing. So you're looking at going kind of backwards from the most recent, if that makes sense. So as I say, 2018 today, you'll be looking at 2018, 2017, 16, backwards from there. So the way I would structure it, the way I like to see it structured, is the dates, and I would always put month and the year. So February 2017 to February 2018, if that is the date. I would then put the job title, and I would then put the name of the company. If you've relocated and that's a reason for sort of job movements, you can also pop in by the company, the town in which that company is situated, because then the recruiter can go, oh, hey, well, this job was Cornwall, then this job was Somerset, and that's why, there's a little bit of sort of jumping around there. Next, I would recommend putting a sort of very brief overview of what that role was. So I would say one sentence, a sentence that basically summarises the reason for that role of existing. So if you were the HR manager, providing HR support for whatever department, team, for the company, something along those lines. Then I would do a section and I would bullet point this. So I would put key responsibilities and bullet point each key responsibility, make sure it's concise, make sure it's to the point. I would also say, again, we'll do a bit more on this on content, but I would also say make sure that it's relevant. Again, I can't stress that enough. And I would put it in, I would jump anything up to the top that's relevant to the job that you're applying for, so that the recruiter at a first glance can see, great, tick. That's on my job description. They've done that. Excellent. Essentially, when you're building a CV, what you're trying to do, and it might not feel right to do it this way, but what you're trying to do is make a recruiter's job easy to understand why you're perfect for that position. If a recruiter is really struggling to see why you've even applied for the job, you're probably not going to get an interview unless something happens that's really lucky. So make it really, really easy for the recruiter to understand why you've applied for the job as quickly as you possibly can in your CV. After you've done your key responsibilities, I would then move on to key achievements. So we're going to cover that again in the content section, because I think this is a section where a lot of people just miss it out, really. And this is what makes you special. It's like, what did you bring to this business, particularly for your sales roles, anything that is business development, those kind of sides of things. It's all well and good to say, I generated new clients, I developed business, I did this, I did that. But how many? How long? What did you actually do? What did you actually bring to the company? Give us some tangible facts. Like I say, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the content section. You continue then to do that sort of same structure. So just to recap, you've got date, you've got job title, you've got the name of company and location if you wish, but I would only put the town, don't go put the full address or anything. Then a short sentence summarising the reason for the role existing, bullet points of key responsibilities, bullet points of key achievements. And repeat that. Just rinse and repeat the whole way back through your career history. Dependent on your career history, how many different jobs you've had, how long you've been working, it's kind of up to you to when you stop, like I say, thinking about that kind of 2-page minute limit. You could have been working for 20 years and only had 2 jobs. You could have been working for 20 years and had 22 jobs. So you've got to use a little bit of kind of censoring really as to what is relevant and what isn't within that. And as I say, you can always use the line further career history available upon request if you need to. So you've got either your experience or your qualifications or your qualifications or your experience. Once you've done that, you then need to, I like people to put a little bit about interests and hobbies. Dependent on the company, some companies really won't be interested, and sometimes it depends what you actually put. So if you do actually have some interesting hobbies, put them in, because actually, again, that's what makes you a human being. Someone will read that and go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Also, if you have a hobby relevant to the field that you're looking to get into or the sort of job that you want. So if you're looking to work with something that is in the ocean industry or something along those sort of lines, and you love surfing, then put it in, because it goes to show that your passion stretches from professional into personal, and there is sort of a bit of synergy there. So I think hobbies and interests are interesting. Other recruiters may not, but that's totally up to them. But I think there's no harm in putting it in. Like I say, it just goes to show that you're interesting. But just my only other caveat on that is, Don't make anything up, because if you do put a hobby and interest, be prepared that the recruiter or hiring manager will ask you about it, because especially if it's an interesting one. So don't say that you like to go rock climbing at the weekend if you've never been rock climbing in your life, because knowing your luck, it will probably be that the recruiter is an avid rock climber and they want to talk rock climbing. So yeah, word of caution, just make sure that it's real. Don't go trying to make yourself look interesting to try and get their attention. After you've done that, so you put your hobbies and your interests, I would then end it with, I don't like people detailing references on CVs. Again, A, you're wasting precious CV space, and B, I just don't think it's necessary. Most recruiters, generally speaking, will not take a reference without letting you know. They also won't usually take a reference until either an offer is on the table or an offer is about to be on the table. So chances are you've probably met them a couple of times. You know, you're pretty much going to be sort of offered the position or there or thereabouts. So I would say references are available upon request. That would be my my sort of advice. But you know, if you really want to detail them, but it's not really the route I would choose to go down. So, just to recap, you've got your name, you've got your contact details, you've got your personal profile, professional profile, whatever you'd like to call it. Then you've got either your education or your work experience, and then depending on which one you put there, you've got your work experience and then your education. Following on from that, you've got some interests and hobbies, and then finally at the bottom you end it with professional references are available upon request. There are some other things you could put in there. So if you've volunteered, you could either put that in your professional experience, or you could start another section saying other experience. And again, it completely depends on what you're trying to do. And, you know, if you've taken on voluntary experience, for instance, that is going to help you in your career, you might want to put that right at the top of the CV, because that's going to be the first thing that the recruiter sees. Just bearing in mind, like I say, trying to make it really easy for the recruiter to understand why you're applying for this job. So, you know, if you've taken on some experience that you think the recruiter needs to see, first and foremost, then put it at the top. And like I say, you can either add it into your professional experience, or you can put it as other experience or professional experiences, that sort of thing. So hopefully that covers a little bit on the structure of a CV. Next, we're going to have a bit of a chat about content. So as I keep saying, I think content is key, really. You can have all these fancy pants layouts, and, you know, a lot of people go for these templates that have sort of shading and colour blocking and photos and things like that. Personally, I say stay away, unless you are applying to a graphic design house or a super creative industry that is going to expect you to have that kind of thing. And I appreciate in some countries they do like you to have a photo, but if you're applying for a job here in the UK, I would steer away from a photo. There's no need, especially if you're on things like LinkedIn. If people want to have a bit of a nosy as to what you look like, they can do that, but I personally don't like seeing photos on CVs, and I don't know any recruiters that do. So like I say, unless you're asked for a photo or you're applying for a job in a country where they expect to see a photo, just leave it. Just don't. It's just not the done thing. Colour blocking, boxes, shading, all that sort of thing. If you're just applying, as I say, for a general office job, you do not need it. It could harm your chances. I mentioned very briefly earlier on about sort of software, and there are some software programs. So in the industry, we call them ATS. That stands for Application Tracking Systems. So when you apply via an online portal, it will go into this sort of ATS, it's either an ATS or an ATS sort of style system. It's basically a database where recruiters hold your information once you've applied for a job, and they can then move you through the process using this applicant tracking system. Some pieces of software and applicant tracking systems will not read your colour blocks. They will not read your shading. They will not like photos. They will not like boxes. And what will happen is your CV will come out the other end looking an absolute garbled mess. And sometimes the recruiter will not know that that is what's happened. Sometimes they will, and sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll just think that you submitted a hot mess of a CV and just automatically reject you on that basis. So it's really just not worth it. If you're going to come up with a CV, There are so many really lovely, clean sort of templates that you can buy on, or you can even get for free actually. You don't even need to buy them. You can go on Google and you can create, you know, lovely sort of CV templates. Just Google it. CV templates for free, you can find them. I do sell some on my Etsy shop, so you're welcome to have a look, but you don't need to spend money if you don't want to. I would also say, looking at the content, the number one thing is tailoring your CV to the job that you're applying for. So again, whether or not a company is using an application portal, whether it's they're being hand screened, whether they're being screened by a machine, they're going to be looking for keywords, and you will find those keywords in the job description. So they're not trying to trip you up. They're looking to check that you have A, read the job description, and B, match what they're looking for. So they've sort of given you the information. It's like if you don't use that information in a job description, it's like going into a test without reading your notes, or, you know, going into a test without doing any revision. You're setting yourself up for failure, because even if you do have some of the experiences and qualifications, if you don't word it in the way that the company speaks, which should be apparent from their adverts, if you don't use the same language as them, if you don't, you know, sort of pick up on those keywords, you could miss out on the opportunity. That is particularly more prevalent within companies that do use, you know, sort of really harsh kind of screening software, because their computer will do it for them. And unfortunately, if you don't have those keywords, computer will say no, basically, because you're not going to match up to the job. So finding out what those keywords are, what they're looking for, and making sure that you match that is super key. As I say, I think I mentioned this, but don't ever write in the third person. It's creepy and awkward, and I hate it, and I don't know any recruiter that likes it. So just don't do it. It's a no-no. And also in content, I think you need to work out what makes you you, what makes you unique, what makes you great, what makes you perfect for this job, what makes you better than anybody else for this job. And there's a way of wording it without sounding arrogant, and the main way is by backing it up with facts. So if you say that you are an amazing salesperson, then put your facts and figures in. If you've had amazing revenue, don't just say top biller. Put your billings in there, you know, give real, you know, real sort of facts for people to kind of grip into and understand why it is that you're such a great salesperson, because facts can't be ignored. I would also use examples of your work. So if you're in a creative industry and you've designed things, or you've made things, or you've built things, link to examples and show, you know, like I say, experience, facts and figures, and you can't go wrong. So I think I've covered a lot of the top tips that I would generally give for a CV, but I think if you, like I say, keep to a simple structure, don't use colour blocking, boxes, shading, photos, anything like that. Stick to 2 pages wherever possible. Keep it relevant, tailor it to the job, tailor it to you. I don't think you can go too far wrong. I say that. You'd be surprised about what I have come across. But like I say, you know, just be true to yourself. Make sure you read everything to do with the job, read up on the company, speak their language. And as I say, I can't say it enough. If you take one thing away from this video, take away that the recruiter is busy. The recruiter wants to know really quickly why you're right for the job. And if they can really quickly sort of shortlist your CV to show to the hiring manager, then you've made their job easier, and you're more likely to get an interview, hopefully. So I think that just about covers everything that I wanted to tell you about today in this video. If you want some more great tips like this, then make sure you sign up to our mailing list. I've put a link below this video. That means you'll get weekly tips, a weekly newsletter, and you'll receive links to products and discounts quicker than anybody else, and also some exclusive discounts by signing up to our mailing list. So I hope you found this useful. Please comment below. If you liked it, hit the like button, because then that helps me sort of reach some other people with this information. And I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you for listening.